Hello, I'm Mike Chobotov, Chief Technology Officer for Endologics. Welcome to All About ALTO. Today I'm going to talk about neck dilatation. On the left you can see an image of a conventional stent graft technology which typically comprises a self-expanding stent and fabric. These self-expanding stents exert a very irregular but rather extensive amount of outward push in the lumen of the neck. The image on the lower left shows the very irregular distribution of that outward force. In sharp contrast, the ALTO sealing ring technology on the right demonstrates a very uniform and modest outward contact in the lumen of the neck and is not self-expanding. This is a key difference. Shown here is a series of radial force measurements of US-approved AAA devices as measured through their on-IFU sizing range. I'd just like to point out that the magnitude of the outward push of these stents in the neck can vary from 2, 3, and even 4 pounds. This is a series of images of AAAs. On the left, an untreated aneurysm. The red arrows denote blood pressure acting in the abdominal aorta. In the section where the aneurysm sac is, the wall of the aneurysm is weakened due to the disease process and hence the lumen dilates. The objective of EVAR is to exclude pressure from acting on that diseased segment of the aorta. In the middle image, a conventional self-expanding stent graft is shown. And you can see by the assumption that there is no endoleak that we've removed the blood pressure acting on the sac or the diseased segment of the aorta. However, as also shown by the red arrows in the neck, blood pressure still acts on the lumen in the neck. That is because these grafts are oversized relative to the lumen that they're deployed in, and therefore the fabric does not carry any tension or hoop stress, and the blood pressure acts unattenuated on the neck. Also shown, however, are blue arrows, which did not exist on the image on the left. Those come from the outward force that I described in the previous slide. The outward force is essentially mechanical pressure, and it acts in tandem with the blood pressure. So while the aneurysm sac has been excluded, the pressure in the neck has actually been increased over the prior condition. On the right shows an ALTO stent graft deployed in the same aneurysm. The assumption that there's no endoleak shows that there are no red arrows acting on the diseased segment of the sac. However, there are also no arrows acting in the neck, because the polymer ring cross-links and carries hoop stress and therefore carries blood pressure, and there is no stored energy or any spring force in that sealing ring. This can have a very dramatic difference in the clinical trajectory of cases treated with these types of devices. The upper curve is what happens in self-expanding devices. This is a series of publications in which we combine the results showing the millimeters of neck growth versus years. And you can see out to 4 years on average these devices were demonstrating about a 5 millimeter growth. The middle curve shows what some researchers found to occur in open aneurysm repair. Above the anastomosis, distal to the renals, is a segment of aorta that is not acted upon by a mechanical stent graft, but still is under the action of blood pressure. You can see then, due to the action of blood pressure, a modest non-zero growth. However, that growth trajectory is much lower and slower than it is with the self-expanding stent grafts, which combine both blood pressure and mechanical pressure. The lower curve, the blue curve, shows basically a zero growth out to 5 years for ovation in the IDE study with an original cohort of 161 patients as measured by an independent imaging core lab. What you can see here is a very stable neck because the neck is not exposed to blood pressure or mechanical pressure, just like the aneurysm sac is also excluded. A very seminal study, 15 years, in which 626 patients were randomized into both an open arm and an EVAR arm, showed that over time, particularly around 6 or 7 years, the EVAR group fared more poorly than the open group. And the authors in this seminal study concluded that it really had to do with this dilating disease process. Interestingly enough, there is a technology, namely ALTO with its polymeric ring, that can actually exclude the neck from pressure and not contribute to this dilating disease process. Another recent publication shows from a series of meta-analyses from 9,700 patients in a couple of dozen different journal articles in which the authors identified neck dilatation. Now, typically a threshold was set of 15% or more, and by that definition, about a quarter of the patients experienced neck dilatation, anywhere from 15 months to 9-year follow-up. In this patient group, they had a 13x hazard ratio of complications such as type 1A endoleak, migration, and reintervention, as opposed to the group which had not experienced as much neck dilatation yet. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to covering other topics about the unique technologies of ALTO.